Welcome to Everyday Orthodox. I'm Elisa Bieletich-Davis, and here we are tonight with another wonderful guest for you. I'm so excited about it. You know, we get together here every Sunday night to meet another everyday Orthodox Christian. And I think it's just so beautiful for us to have an opportunity to get to know the members of the body of Christ and to build community here. You know, Orthodoxy is can seem a little fragmented here in North America, where we worship in different jurisdictions and different languages. Sometimes we're even on different calendars. And we talk a lot about church unity, and we concern ourselves about sort of the organization of our church. But I think real unity, you know, the kind of unity that Christ spoke of, is really about loving one another and caring about one another. And so, you know, to do that, we're going to have to get to know each other. So this is like our big sort of continental coffee hour where we can meet some different people. And honestly, it really is actually based on coffee hour experiences. That's where the idea came to me, because when I'm at coffee hour at my church, or if I'm visiting another parish, you know, if I'm sitting there and somebody comes and sits down, I might start asking them questions. And I'll tell you what, I have heard the most amazing stories, and people have, you know, they just look like a nice little mild-mannered person sitting there. And it's like, oh, I used to work for the FBI or something. You never know. You never know what's going to come. So I think in part, Orthodox people are so interesting because so many have come in from foreign lands, right? Or grandparents came in and they grew up with an interesting immigrant family, or a lot of us converted and we came from all different sorts of backgrounds. But so we're really, you know, not exactly a homogenous crowd around here. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on and a lot of diversity. So I'm glad you're here to meet someone tonight with us. And I do want to remind you that Everyday Orthodox streams live on YouTube. If you want to see our smiling faces, you can go to YouTube, to the Ancient Faith Ministries channel, and we're live there. And then actually after the show is over, they will archive the video, put it up on the YouTube page as well, so you can find it later there. You can also find us, of course, on ancientfaith.com and the AFR app. And those are also archived, so you can find all the past episodes. You know, if you've got a road trip coming or something, find some past episodes. Also, we're on the Ancient Faith page on Facebook Live. All right, that covers it. Welcome to the program. If you have a question for our guest, you can actually go to the YouTube page and make a comment. I will see it and I will ask her your question. So if you have a question, just let us know and we'll ask it. But all right, tonight's guest, actually, I'm extra delighted about tonight's guest because if you listen to my interview with Father Nick Anton, we were talking about the Assembly of Bishops, and he commented, he said, Spyridoula Fotinis does this thing. And I was like, wait a minute, you know Spyridoula? I know Spyridoula. I was very excited, and I immediately messaged Spyridoula and was like, you need to come on the program. And she is here. So I met Spyridoula in 2018. She was at a YES leadership conference. And YES is Youth Equipped to Serve. It's part of Focus North America. And if you've been listening for long, you know that YES is just one of my favorite ministries in the Orthodox Church. If you don't know much about it, check it out at Youth Equipped to, no, it's yesnorthamerica.org, but it stands for Youth Equipped to Serve. All right. So that's how I met Spyridoula. She is, she works in, I'm going to say this funny now because she wrote it so beautifully. You wrote it so beautifully, Spyridoula, so I'm just going to read it the way you wrote it. She's interested in the intersections of faith and social policy, specifically related to homelessness, which I think is just, it's very important. It's very beautiful. And it's something that maybe in the church we don't talk enough about or work enough on. And so currently she's serving as the Director of Inter-Parish Associations for the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of the USA, which is pretty impressive job, quite frankly. So, Spyridoula, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm excited. It's so good to see you, too.
I'm so excited. It has been a while, and it's really good to see you again. So it's really nice. But, okay. So tell me, you probably have already told me this off the show, but I don't even remember. So tell me, where were you born? And how does your story begin?
Yeah, I'm from northern New Jersey, so born there, I would say in a pretty strong Greek-American community. My grandfather and grandmother were the local priest and presbytera of the Greek parish, so I grew up very much part of the local church community. And so life would be very colored by church activities, going to Vespers all the time. I remember like sleeping under the pew and all these things. And then also the Greek kind of community activities. So that's where I grew up and was raised, and really good, warm memories. Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. So did you have like a big extended family in the area, or was it just your family? What was it like?
Yeah, my family, and I would say it was like my mom stayed in the area, and so the extended family was really the church family as well. And we obviously have actual blood relatives nearby too, but I would say a lot of people at church I call like aunt or uncle. So this definitely feeling part of a community from the beginning. I remember my grandpa, my papu, like holding me up in front of the whole church at like, I don't know, 1 or 2 or some probably a little bit older, and was like, this is my granddaughter, like kind of like Simba, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Circle of life.
Yeah, like from the top. Yeah. So yeah, I would say like family is a term that is really encompassing of a lot of the people that were around my community, especially from church.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is great. So were your grandparents immigrants, or was it like their parents or parents' parents? Like at what point did everybody come over?
Yeah, my grandparents immigrated by boat to the United States, and the people in that area in New Jersey were searching for a priest. And so it kind of worked out that they were waiting from the bishop to send them a priest, and my grandfather came over earlier. So they picked him up and were like, great, here's the priest for the community.
Really?
So
That's amazing,
yeah,
actually.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it. But yeah, and my yayas, my grandmother's like uncle was also a priest in New York, New Jersey, and so he also kind of supported them when they started out. But they started the community and were there for many, many years, over 45, and then retired. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so in the New Jersey area, I would imagine that it's pretty dense with Orthodox churches, right? Like a lot of Greek churches in the area.
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, we had like really strong like Goya, Greek Orthodox Youth of America programs, and got to know a lot of the Greek churches. And then my mom especially was very intentional, shout out to her, I'm sure she's listening, very intentional about getting us to be introduced to the other Orthodox communities nearby, which I think is not very fitting for my current role. But there's an OCA church 2 minutes away from the Greek church, and our Carpatho Russian church 15 minutes away. So we also like over the years got to know these communities really well, and then kind of explore more Orthodox churches in the New Jersey area. I would say there's like at least 40 Orthodox churches in just northern New Jersey. So it's pretty dense, to your point.
Yeah, it's pretty dense. Absolutely. So that's really neat that your mom did that, actually, because I know a lot of kids and up there in particular, because I was at like the NYU OCF one time, and I'm talking to the kids, and they're all saying, I didn't really meet other kinds of Orthodox kids until OCF. Like until they got to college, they weren't really exposed to kids outside their particular, whatever jurisdiction it was. So yeah, shout out to your mom. That is impressive.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So
yeah.
What kind of stuff were you doing as a little kid? What were you like?
Oh, great question. I don't know. What was I like? I don't know. Really involved in church. Continue to be involved. Yeah, like that's Greek activities, and then just like an athlete as well. So did a lot of sports, which was fun in like school and then outside of school. So like soccer and cross country and track were kind of my main things. Yeah.
Impressive. That's very cool. Very
yeah.
Cool. So when you were a kid, if we had asked you, like, what are you going to be when you grow up? What would you have been thinking at that point?
Definitely would have said archaeologist.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, I loved archaeology.
Did you ever try studying archaeology at all in college, or was it long gone by the time you got there?
So we did like explore it. We were connected through our family somehow to an archaeologist. And so we got to go on a dig in Greece, at Mount Lycaon, which was super cool to really see. Like, I think it was maybe in high school or maybe in middle school. So I got to like go see a dig, which was really exciting. And I was like, that's awesome. But then going to the warehouse, I was like, I need to be around people. Like, I can't sit and like dust everything off. But always the history really encouraged me to study that. But I still am very interested, and you never know. But yeah, no, I moved to international relations instead.
It is funny how, we have this idea of what a particular job is. And then when you see it, you're like, oh, well, it's actually not exactly what I thought it was. And what I really want to do is study what the archaeologists figured out. Like, I just tell me about it afterwards.
Yeah, I was like, let's see the mummies, and like that's what I want to know. And then like, but getting there, maybe not my thing. So yeah, but grateful for that.
There you go. There you go. Well, and in the end, it turns out that you're working a lot with living people and doing a lot of good things for them. So it's a good thing.
God willing, yeah.
God willing. But so, okay, so you're going through high school. You were involved in Goya and all of that all the way through. That is lovely. So did you ever have a period where you felt like you kind of left the church and came back, or were you always kind of happy in the church? And if so, what is the key to that for all of the parents listening today?
Yeah, I would say like definitely that time period of life, and for most years, definitely, yeah, I don't think I had like a leaving of the church, if you want to call it that. I think it's obviously healthy to have questions and doubts, but I think that came later on. High school, college, I would say what the biggest ministries for me were Crossroad, Summer Institute. Huge shout out to them. That was an incredibly formative experience. I went when I graduated high school, going to be a freshman in college. So that was really amazing. Yeah.
Well, actually, let's slow down and talk about that. Tell me about your Crossroads experience. Like, because first of all, some of our audience may not know what it is. So you got to tell us a little bit about what it is, but also just for you personally, where were you before and what did it change? What was it like?
Yeah. So Crossroad is a 10-day summer institute that's hosted now in different parts of the country, which is amazing. But when I went, it was only in Boston, and it was hosted at Hellenic College Holy Cross, and it's a pan-Orthodox ministry that is really beautiful and formative. And so kind of the three questions that we explored are, who am I, who is God, and who is my neighbor? And so those questions, I think, were helpful in providing opportunities to think about the faith for myself and more differently. Like, I grew up in a very strong rooted Orthodox family, and theology is a topic very often. People in my family read a lot. So it's always like a topic of conversation and always like a lot of learning. But for myself, I think Crossroad was kind of that first step. Oh, let me backtrack one second. The other thing that really formed me was I went on an OCMC mission trip, or a trip to Nairobi, Kenya, to the seminary that was there. And so that was kind of the first step, and then went to Crossroad that summer. So both of those experiences were formative. And I would say at Crossroad, like, one, the professors, just like what we would say, like drinking from a fire hydrant of theology was crazy.
Seminary professors, right? Like,
yeah,
Rossi and all kinds of different people are there. And so cool.
Yeah.
It's a neat program. And just so our audience knows, if you have kids who are finishing up junior or senior year of high school, they can go to Crossroads. Everybody can go. You just apply and show up, and they get all of this beautiful, they learn a lot, I think, but it's that self-discovery. And I think it's too, and you alluded to this a little bit, there's something so important at that age about encountering the faith and thinking about the faith separately from your family. Because growing up, you're Orthodox because your family's Orthodox, generally. Not always, but for the most part. And then, you have these experiences. I think that's why summer camp is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things where you go away from the family, and now you're Orthodox just because it's you and you want to be Orthodox. And I feel like that's a big difference. Is that part of what that experience was for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it just strengthened it as well. Yes, I would say so. And then I think that was coupled by then being part of Orthodox Christian Fellowship in college, like OCF, and then YES program, of course. So there's all these kind of complements to learning and exploring even more, being supported in the faith, and I think the key thing is having really good mentors in the church, which is really vital, especially as a young woman in the church. So I'm grateful to those people for that as well.
That's wonderful. Well, and so just to talk about YES for a minute, so that was when you were in high school. Did you guys do YES trips? Did you have like 4 YES trips through, or I guess it would be middle school and high school. So did you do YES a lot, or did you just do it the one time?
No, I came into the program a bit late, actually. So I think I started when the college days were happening with OCF, and I was part of the student leadership board, and then kind of got involved with OCF. And then they were kind of piloting the YES college days, and then got interested in being a YES leader. So got trained and then helped with a trip in DC with Wadid, who I know you interviewed on here as well,
Yes,
and some others. Yeah, so that was my yes involvement. Did a couple trips, and then I think then COVID hit or whatever. I had to slowly stop my involvement, and then we had COVID. So
yeah, and then there we were. Yeah. But,
yeah.
All right. Well, so, and I think it's nice that we're bringing up some of these organizations, right? Crossroads and Yes and OCF, because they're all organizations that need people's support. Like as Orthodox Christians, we need to be supporting these organizations so that they're there for the next youth who come through, as to have that support and to find those mentors. And that's very
absolutely.
Nice. And yes, that program specifically was very much about homelessness and poverty. And so do you feel like that impacted your direction, or were you already headed that way?
Yeah, I think Yes's approach of as Katrina Botaro says, right? Who is the best? Breaking down the service project mentality, at least that was the lingo that was used when I was there. And so thinking about, of course, approaching people as icons of Christ. And we got a little bit of that in Crossroad and had some really intense experiences with people that were living on the street in that moment. So kind of being formed from that. And then, yes, providing kind of more of this framework to understand a little bit better as an Orthodox Christian. But even before that, OCF had only one time did an OCF Real Break at St. Herman House, which is a focus center in Cleveland, Ohio. Oh. And so 4 of us went out there for a week and got to kind of live near the St. Herman's house and be part of the daily feeding programs, meet a lot of community partners, see how the city works together, and just be there and celebrate divine services with them in their chapel. And so that was, I think, more formative, especially an experience where we went under the bridge and there were encampments and meeting people who were my age, which I was 18 at the time, that were barefoot, covered in stores all over their legs and living next to the lake in a tent. And I was like, what? This is the United States. I had never seen poverty to that level before. Yeah.
And I think in some ways that's intentional. We keep that out of sight, right? We don't see that. So we have laws to make sure you don't have to see that, right? We out of sight, out of mind in a lot of ways. But well, that's beautiful. I love that you took advantage of almost every Orthodox youth program. That's amazing.
Thank God.
That's amazing. But it's powerful, and it's really beautiful stuff and people are doing really good work. You were too late or too early for OVC, or I'm sure you would have spent some time doing that one too. But okay, so when you studied in college, what was your major? What did you study?
Yeah, I studied international studies and sociology. Right. So I was interested in diplomacy, working for the UN, and then sociology because of interest in I took a social policy class and I was blown away, urban social policy, and blown away by how different laws impact people, and talked a lot about housing and affordability and land use and all these things. And so that really piqued my interest as well. Yeah.
That's great. So where were you at school? We didn't even talk about that.
I went so first I started at community college in New Jersey, which great, amazing. Community colleges are great. If you have one near you, that's good. I recommend. But that was a really amazing time. We also had an OCF chapter there, which was really
nice,
memorable, I guess. Most of us were not Orthodox in the group, so we learned a lot from people. Yeah, a lot of, we had at least one catechumen that actually converted, but a good flavor of, sometimes we had some friends of mine that were either Jewish or Jehovah's Witnesses or atheist, or inquiring. And so we would have very rich conversations in that OCF chapter.
Wow. But not always inquiring. Sometimes just, no, I'm happy with Judaism, but I'm just going to come and have this conversation.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I remember having a sign at the club fair, and it was what was it? Something Orthodox, but not Jewish, Orthodox Christianity is Orthodox, not Jewish. And the Orthodox Jewish people on campus were what is this? So it would allow some really good conversations. Sometimes people would come up to me and be your God is wrong and horrible, and how could you believe in this God? And I was what are you talking about? It was pretty intense. Yeah. It was interesting times.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Oh, it's Father Stephen Freeman will say, sometimes he'll be talking to someone and they'll say they don't believe in God. And he's well, tell me about the God you don't believe in. And he'll be yeah, I don't believe in that God either. That God sounds terrible, there are
Right.
different there are different views of God, and there's, well, there
Yeah,
you go.
right. Not
All
assuming.
right.
Absolutely. So yeah, that was that. And then I went to school. I transferred after 2 years, got my associates, transferred to school in Manhattan, the City College of New York, which is part of the
Yeah.
CUNY or City University system. It was a great school as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Okay. See, I was assuming you were in Washington, D.C. because you went on the trip with Wadid, but you just traveled down there.
Yeah, I did just travel down there. Yeah. Yeah.
So you stayed with your parents when you were when you were in community college, and then did you move out when you went to New York?
I did. Yeah. Then I lived in the city for a while.
Yeah.
In New York
How was
City.
that
Sorry, not to
transition?
assume.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How was that transition? Like, how was the shift for you moving out of your parents' house and being on your own for the first time?
Yeah, I think it was exciting. I think also New Jersey is only like an hour away where my
Oh, yeah,
family's
you're
from,
not
so I
far
would go
from
back.
home.
Yeah, not
Very
far
far.
from home. So I would go back pretty often for, baptisms, weddings, etc. There was always
Yes.
something happening. Yeah, I think it's a really good experience. Like, I'm grateful for it. I think you learn a lot and are challenged a lot. So I enjoyed it. Living in New York City was a good, and of course, like everything, good and challenging times as well. But I liked it. Really loved living there.
So did you find a parish in New York that you really liked, or did you go home all the time and kind of stick to your old parish?
Yeah, no, I did find I like to parish hop there a lot too. So I went to like the Greek Cathedral on the Upper East Side. There's an OCA, really nice little church, St. Mary Magdalene on the West Side, OCA Cathedral in the East Village. Later, after school, I was more attached to St. Spyridoula in Washington Heights, which is a Greek parish, and I grew up going there as a kid every year for my name day. So that was really special to be part of that parish and be really involved with the young adult group there. So that was really nice.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
That's very cool. All right. So as you're going through all of this, what were you doing like work-wise right after college? What did you end up starting out with?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I was always interested in working for the UN. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to travel the world, learn new languages, and really see the world. And so in my heart was like, well, I would love to do like church ministry and work for the UN. And of course, I was like, that doesn't exist. But a friend of mine, yeah, a friend of mine was really close with now Father Nick Anton. And so Father Nick used to be the UN representative for the Greek Archdiocese, which is a pan-Orthodox ministry. And we have like NGO ECOSOC status at the UN as a faith-based organization. So basically, my friend connected me to Father Nick, and I started as an intern for him my junior year of college. So Father Nick and I go way back. He's known me for many years. Yeah, so I was able to intern with him, and then my senior year in my last semester, he actually became the director of the department, and the position that he used to be in was empty. And so he invited me to apply for it, and I got the position. So I started part-time my senior year and then full-time in the summer where I graduated. So I worked there for 2 years.
And what was that like? What was that job like?
It was amazing. Yeah, definitely would love to put more on people's radar the Office of Inter-Orthodox Ecumenical Interfaith Relations at the Greek Archdiocese, because they do a lot of pan-Orthodox and of course inter-Orthodox interfaith work as well. But the UN piece is really amazing because that is also a pan-Orthodox ministry. And so the idea is to provide kind of an Orthodox perspective on global issues and be able to do advocacy work. So my work was really focused on Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew's like green patriarchs and environmental concerns. And so I did a lot of advocacy around that. And we started the Greening the Parish kind of ministry out of the Archdiocese. And then I was personally interested in homelessness, like ending homelessness globally. And so I was involved with the working group to end homelessness. And actually there was an event, the Commission on Social Development, when I was there, that this working group was able to lobby hard enough to get it as a main topic about homelessness and housing to be like looked at by all of these different kind of permanent missions of countries to the UN. And so we got to do that for a couple different days and was really amazing. And we did a side event. They're called like different events where you have representatives of a permanent mission, so a country and your different kind of groups of people. So we did one with the permanent mission of Finland because they're known for being one of the main countries that was expected to end homelessness by 2027. So we had a panel with them and a couple other faith-based leaders, which was incredible. And then COVID happened like 2 weeks later, so everything shut down. But the work at that position was amazing because you get to see a lot of different perspectives, both from an interfaith perspective and, of course, secular, and then also be a bit more in the diplomacy and see kind of the importance of relationship building and advocacy. I never thought I would do advocacy work because I told myself in college, no, thank you, but I had to learn and it was great.
What is it like? Like, what skills does it take to do advocacy work? Like, and I think sort of as connected to that, why did you not want to do it? And you know what I mean? Like, what was it about it that just seemed like, no, thank you?
Yeah, I guess like I was thinking like more high level politics, which I didn't have to touch that, thank God. So more in like the NGO space, it's a lot of just like trying to build trust among people. And so a lot of it was just not being afraid to go up to like the permanent representative of whatever country and be like, hello, my name is this. This is what I'm interested in. You're kind of doing this as well. We should totally work together. So just like trying to build like without being super in people's faces, but just like the consistency of and frequency of showing up and being somewhere and not being afraid to like go up to someone and be like, this is right or this is wrong and you should do this or whatever. But obviously it's done in a diplomatic way.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it hard for you to get to a place where you could just sort of walk up and start going, or did it just take a couple of times and you were like, okay, I'm good?
No, I think it's definitely a learning. I learned a lot there. One, how to just like watch, observe, and learn from people. So a lot of the time, just like one, doing like a ton of informational interviews with different partners and just learning about kind of how they navigate the space. And then like eventually building that courage. I would say even like when you're finally, like when I went to the permanent mission of Finland to ask them to co-sponsor the event with us, the colleague that was supposed to come with me got lost and then they weren't letting her up in the lobby. So it was just like me and like 3 Finnish representatives and I had no idea what's like, but it happened and it was okay, you know? So I think it's just like being in situations where you're forced to be like, okay, I need to be courageous and it will be fine. Like these are people too. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine in general, you get positive reactions, right? Because this is what they're there to do too, right? They're trying to relationship build and network and find somebody to work with, right? Or no?
I would imagine, yeah, maybe like I had always positive experiences for the most part. So yes, I'm sure there's also the negative, but yeah, for sure. And I think it's also that as an NGO, you don't have so much access to certain spaces in the UN. So sometimes you really need to like rely on some of your relationships that you've built or professional colleagues. And so that might seem, you have to be really smart about it too, right? You can't overuse them. So you learn a lot.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, you know, I mean, it makes sense. And in a way, it's beautiful that it's about relationships. But in another way, it's almost kind of annoying too, because it's like, one more thing that's kind of political and like, you know, are you popular? Or, you know, like so that I don't know. But is it a good or bad thing that so much of this is relationship based?
Yeah, I guess it's also both. Like, again, I'm not super involved in the political, like the higher political of it. So
yeah,
from an NGO perspective,
level, even at that lower level, though, right?
I think it's tough, right? Like, yeah, right. I think, for example, like after me, there was different people that came into the position. And so there's been a little bit more rotating through the position, which is fine. But then other organizations, for example, have people who've been there for like 10, 15 years. So like their ability to navigate the space is much stronger, obviously. So I would say that is difficult because even when Father Nick and I switched, like he had me meet some of his colleagues, but they were his colleagues, right? I had to build the relationship with them so they can trust me too. So yeah, to your point, I think it just could be frustrating because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Well, and especially if we have a lot of turnaround, like, hey, Orthodox people, let's think about like, maybe if we had a team, right, then you could have people switching out without it being, when it's just one person, I think it's maybe harder. Is it just one person, I assume? Or is there a whole team working at the UN for the GOA?
No, unfortunately right now, limited staff capacity to just one person. That's why it's really important to have like advisory teams. That's what we tried to build when I was there. Because you need that. Like, you're not an expert in everything. You can't be. So.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we are going to take a very short break, and then we'll be right back with Spyridoula Fotinis. See you in one moment.
Waiting and Dating by Lillian Andrews examines the dynamics of singleness and dating from an Orthodox Christian perspective. It explores why, when, how, and who to date, while also tackling topics like purity, sexuality, temptation, and repentance. Available now at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
You're listening to Everyday Orthodox on Ancient Faith Radio. We've been speaking with Spyridoula Fotinis, and Spyridoula, of course, is working. Well, you were working for the GOA. How does that work? Yeah, it's through the GOA, even though it's pan-Orthodox, and
Yes.
it's also at the UN, right? Okay. So, how long did you do that?
For 2 years.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what did you end up doing when you left? What was your next position?
So as I kind of mentioned, this side event we did with the Permanent Mission of Finland, I was always interested in, one, studying abroad, and two, when I heard them and watched the slideshow and the graphs show these numbers of how they're expected to end homelessness by 2027, I really wanted to go to Finland and do my master's there to kind of live in a society that is able to achieve this or hope to achieve it and understand how is it possible. So I moved to Finland for my master's and was there for the past 2.5 years.
So how was Finland? Like what?
Incredible.
Yeah. So I don't know. I have a million questions about that, right? But so when you got there, I guess, what did you expect and what did you find? And were they the same thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was asked that a lot too. I actually had no expectations because I think we talk about this a lot with friends too. When you go to a new place, you expect that everything will be different. It will be difficult. You have no idea what's going to happen. And I think the harder piece is coming back because the reverse cultural shock you're not ready for. So I would say that is the first
so
kind
true,
of general.
Isn't it? That is very, very true. That you were ready for them to be different, but when you come back, you're not ready for the changes in you and the way that you see your own home again. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so what did you? So you didn't have big expectations, but what was your impression? Was it like, is everybody going to be like really, I don't know, sort of progressive, and everybody in the whole country is just on board with ending homelessness, and they're all different than us because they're a little bit more, I don't know, better about this particular issue? Or did you, I don't know, I'm just curious, like what did you think you were going to see when you got there?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure. What did I think? I was just curious, how they're there. And I think something I learned a lot about is just it's culturally different as well. So actually, a lot of people didn't know that, like a lot of Finns, that some of my friends would be like, oh, really? Like, wow, great for us. I had no idea that we had such good.
Yes, that's seriously. My family's in Denmark, which is very close to Finland, and it's a very similar thing. I'll be like, "Oh yeah, you guys are doing this," and they're like, "Are we? Interesting." It's not. But the stuff that they're aware of is stuff that I didn't hear about. So it's all. It's different. But what is Finnish culture like? Because I feel like Finnish people I've met in the U.S. are like really different from Americans. They're really, I don't even know how to describe it, but they're unusual people. It's a really unusual culture.
I mean, I would say as a Greek American coming in, I would always be the one who's ready to socialize and be like, all right, how's everyone? Loud and everything. And I remember I worked for the university for about a year, and one of my colleagues, I don't know, it was the morning of this conference. I was like, oh, hey, how are you? And he's like, do you really want to know? And I was like, yeah. And then he told me for 30 minutes about how he's actually doing. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a cultural difference. That was fun. And also just small talk is not really a thing. So I learned how to be okay with silence in Finland, I would say. That was one big thing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think in general abroad, right, that's sort of an impression of Americans is we smile a lot for no reason. And we are constantly asking people how they are and not really expecting an answer. And I think people find that really odd about us. Is that true of Finland as well? Do they find us a little weird for?
I think it depends. Like, I had a lot of Finnish friends who maybe are a little different, but I like my Finnish friends were like very much like, once you get to know them, it's also a thing, like a lot of Finnish people, and I want to like generalize obviously everyone, but like it's said that like Finnish people, once they open up to you, are very loyal friends. And I definitely agree. Like the relationships I made took time to cultivate, as with anywhere. But these are like true friends that I, God willing, will have for life. And some of them were Finnish and other internationals as well. So definitely feel that part of it as well. But a lot of my Finnish friends were definitely open. They had traveled the world, studied, and lived in a lot of places. They were notoriously late, which was fine for me because I'm always late. Right. So it's like, I'll take it.
Like, yes, I got that. No problem.
Yeah. But like other times, like when I did my internship at this homelessness this organization that did a lot of the work to end homelessness in Finland, I remember like I would always carry a lot of the conversation and then just like be like, well, I'm just gonna try to shut my mouth, and we just like sit in silence for 5 minutes. And I was like, wow, I'm not gonna be the one to break it. Like eventually I learned to be like, I'm not gonna be the American who's like, so how's the weather, everyone?
Right. Did it strike you as, I think it's so interesting how uncomfortable we are with quiet, right? Like we can't, you can learn, obviously we're teachable, but there is that American tendency to be like, well, we're at a dinner party. There are 6 of us around this table. It can't just be quiet. Like, why would it just be quiet? That's crazy. You be quiet when you're alone.
Yeah, definitely different culture. Of course, like when people get like a little bit more comfortable, they'll be more loud and things. But I remember like the buses would be like dead quiet. Like somebody would call me and be like, hello, can I call you back later? Because like people understand obviously English. Like I don't need the whole bus to like broadcast my conversation. Yeah, and that was weird coming back though, right? Because then I got used to this like quiet environment, and then it was like, oh my gosh, why is everyone so loud? So it goes both ways.
Interesting. All right. So, okay, the big question, how are they ending homelessness in Finland? What are they doing?
Yeah, so I would say like, and now if anyone who's listening is very familiar, the current government has changed a little bit of the policy, but still over the past couple of years since the 80s, so there's this approach called housing first. It was actually first coined here in the United States by Dr. Samson Barris in New York, actually out of NYU. And so the idea is that people receive housing without any preconditions. So you don't need to be sober or drug-free or anything else. You receive a house and then you're given a support team based on your needs to figure that out and then work towards those different goals as you would like. So the Finns also had a very similar model. It's also a little bit different. So it's called like Finnish housing first. And I'll try to give a very overview because I studied this for a while, obviously, so won't go into great detail. But basically what the Finns have continued to do is, one, they had really strong political leaders who kept this as an important topic throughout different changes in government. And so there was very strong people who said this is an issue. Obviously, in the past, Finland it's in the Nordics, so it's a cold country, which I'm sure you're having family from Denmark. Yeah, it gets cold.
Really cold. Like, and I think, we all think about this about Finland, right? Like Finland is freezing cold. So what would it be like to be homeless in Finland? Like, can a person survive without a home
So that's what happened. I think it was in the 70s that there was actually, I think, don't quote me the number, but over 50, maybe to 100 men who were, there was no space for them in a shelter and they froze overnight to death, unfortunately. And so this kind of spurred even more, kind of obviously like that's not okay. So kind of spurring this, and then also being like a social welfare state, obviously how the country is set up is quite different. And so what the Finns did is, one, had strong policy and leaders that advocated for this. Two, they work collaboratively at all levels of governance very well. That was very shocking to me. And it's also a very low hierarchy society. So people, when I was like talking to people on my internship, like they work with government leaders all the time. So like government to grassroots is communicating all the time. At least channels are created for this communication to be streamlined, right? And so there's a sharing of what's happening and what people's lives are. And obviously it could always be better, but compared to what I had experienced here in the US, they were like, yeah, we just talked to each other. And I was like, what? Like, you don't understand. Like, this is not
like, you
normal.
can just call it. That's a really important person. You can't just call that guy, right?
Yeah. Or even like for my thesis work, I was trying to do some interviews with government officials, and I just like sent an email to their office, and like, not that they responded, but at least people in their office responded to me and actually set up a time to speak with me, and like very high level people. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's just crazy. But yeah, so that level of like collaboration is really important. And they never stopped building housing, which in a lot of other countries, we have stopped production of affordable housing, including our own. So these like over from the 80s, right? And so over the period of time, then having an emphasis on continuing to build housing. And the important thing about housing first is then, like I said, you give the right supportive services. So Finland like adjusted to this. I don't remember the exact year now, but they took this period of transition to change their programs from having like the staircase model, it's called, like you need to graduate every level. So you need to be drug-free, you need to be sober, substance-free, etc. Then you can get housing at the end. And so they transitioned out of this model, and the government actually gave a lot of funding to new staff, and new like a shelter, which was the Salvation Army shelter, was completely transformed, and it was made actually into apartments, so like different units in there. I don't remember now how many, but the idea was like having the right staff that are trained, and then having this model or value of model, and then providing apartments for people to actually then do this work and then be supported to, you know, get their lives a little bit better. The idea is also that it's they use a harm reduction approach, it's called. And so it's not like we're telling you you have to be drug free. We're going to walk along with you, and like you have to choose. Like we can't make that decision for you, which I know sometimes we struggle with that here in the US, but it's very much like you have to want it as well. Like we can't force you. And so they're trying to reduce the harm to the person. So there's a lot of different levels of it, but I would say like, because they've had really strong investment in this kind of policy framework, and then also from a values perspective, that really threw me off too. Like in my thesis work, I did a bit of, like I said, interviewing, compared the city of Helsinki and New York City, and then just kind of the American and Finnish kind of approach. And one of the things that came out for me was that from a human rights perspective, the right to housing was very strong in Finland and in everybody's mind. Whoever I talked to, like people need a roof over their head for everything else to be taken care of. And more so in the US, it was that idea of like, pick yourself up from your bootstraps. Like, well, people don't deserve that because they didn't work hard enough for it. And like, there are obviously voices that are against that, but like the general sentiment was still like, people are not worthy of housing because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, I'll stop there, but learned a lot.
Well, which makes me think of St. John Chrysostom, right? Like he's worthy because he's human, right? Like that's it. And that's like our traditional stance. And I don't think that necessarily is the stance of most Orthodox people in the US, but we should reconsider, because that is actually what the fathers said. But it is interesting to me because we've had a lot of conversations about that here in Austin. It's the same sort of thing where like you have to be off drugs before you can get housing. But of course, the problem is you're on the street. You have to really think about what life on the street looks like, right? Like it's not just like, oh, the weather and I don't have a comfortable place. It's like somebody could come and just beat you in the middle of the night. You're very vulnerable all the time. That vulnerability never goes away. And it is really hard to become sober from an addicted place, to become sober in your nice house. How much harder? Like this is a huge barrier that we're putting up for people to overcome. And then one of the interesting things that we saw here, or that, I don't know if you know about Mobile Loaves and Fishes in Austin, we have something called Community First Village. And it's a private organization. And essentially what they were seeing was that when you put people in apartments, even like then if they don't have community around them, if their community's on the street and they're lonely in the apartment, it is really hard to stay sober. And it's really hard to accomplish all these things just as a person alone in a tiny apartment versus with a community. And so that's been a big that's been a big effort here, I know, but it's a private effort because I assure you it's not the Texas government doing it. We really like low taxes, but if that means everybody gives their money to Mobile Loaves and Fishes, that would work out okay. But
Yeah.
so it's interesting to me because what you're describing of the right to housing and this idea of reducing harm, as opposed to like, not that you have to go from 0 to 60. You don't have to go from like whatever your terrible situation is right now to everything's fine and you're in an apartment and everything's great. But like this, like, let's make it a little less worse and a little less worse and a little less worse and hope that eventually it works out well. But even if it's just a little less worse, like maybe we can be okay with that outcome. It feels very Orthodox, right? It feels very Christian, but Finland is a pretty secular country, right? Like I would assume Finland, like the rest of the Nordic countries, isn't particularly religious. Is that right? Or are they?
Yeah, I would say like generally, I guess secular, but I will also say like having lived there, the Lutheran Church is the main religion, but also actually the Orthodox Church is the second state religion. So there's like 1%. It's Orthodox. Yeah. So it's a small percentage, but
because Finland's right next to it, borders Russia, right? Which does it? Am I crazy?
Yeah. Yeah, you're correct. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Because I never think of it that I think of, Scandinavia and then Russia way over there. And then and then it turns out
Finland's
they're actually right next to each other. It's just that's where the line is between East and West, right? But so I would imagine have a lot of Orthodox influence and have gone back and Orthodoxy moves across the border a little bit there. Tell me about the Finnish church. What was your experience with them?
Yeah, they're amazing. So there is like a history where now part of Karelia, which is now part of modern day Russia, used to be part of Finland. It was like a really strong Orthodox kind of stronghold, and a lot of people I know have roots from there. But yeah, the Finnish Orthodox Church is really awesome and very unique in that also they are the Finnish Orthodox Church, and so that means that the liturgy is celebrated in Finnish and really kind of living in this like language of the people kind of practice. And of course there are parishes that like do it in Church Slavonic, and obviously now with the influx of Ukrainian refugees there's also a need for there's a Ukrainian kind of speaking parish, but they also do half in Finnish and half in Ukrainian. But when I was there, one, I got to know the liturgy in Finnish really well, which was a cool skill I did not expect to acquire.
Yeah.
But they also had a parish that I went to called the Kotikirkko, which is like the home church, and they would do the liturgy in a different language every week. So we would celebrate in English, in Swedish, in Arabic, in Romanian, and whatever else was kind of present and needed.
Oh, that's neat. How neat.
Yeah.
So is it like mostly different people who are coming, like do Arabic people come to the Arabic week? Or is it really like a cohesive community that's there every week, no matter what the language is?
A mix of both. So I would say like that was definitely like my home parish, and then I would go to the cathedral a lot. So there was definitely like people who were always there, and it was a very welcoming community. Also like you knew you could speak English there pretty freely. Like obviously everyone's very fluent in English in Finland for the most part, especially in Helsinki. So that was nice too. Yeah. So it's definitely like a nice glue of, that's where I would say my international church friends all came from, like my best friends from there for sure. But also something that was, the church there is really wonderful. I highly recommend for people to check it out. 2 other tidbits is like, one, they celebrate Pascha or Easter on the same day as the Western calendar. So some people know about that, but that was really different. Which is cool.
And I think there are a number of things about the Finnish church that are sort of out of step with what you expect from an Orthodox church because they're a state religion, right? And I want to say that there are certain requirements that they have to do, or is it just that they're choosing to do it? Like the Pascha, for instance, are they choosing to do it differently, or do they have a choice?
I'm not sure. What I understood was like what I was told before was that it was like because of it being a state religion and the country is quite small, it's only like 5 million. So it was that if you don't celebrate together, it really fragments the population because people have off for the Western Easter, and a lot of people are in mixed marriages, right? Like I think most of the people I met there were mixed. One person is Orthodox and the other is Lutheran or non-practicing. So it was also, I think, like pastorally, I've heard it from both ends that we get to celebrate together. And I think it was really beautiful too, because then like we have off, obviously, but also we're like celebrating as a country and it's Easter or Pascha. So yeah, that's
Wow.
that. But I also think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I realized, right, because you grew up Greek Orthodox, so you had never experienced that before. Like you had never
Yeah,
been
no.
in a place where nobody was at work today because it's the day after Easter and everyone's resting. Oh, how interesting. Okay. Because I converted, right? So I had that experience for a long time because I didn't know that the Orthodox weren't celebrating, because what did I know?
Right.
And then eventually, when I became Orthodox, now I've had this other bifurcated experience where my family is celebrating Easter at a different time than I am. And it is a difficult thing. And I'll tell you, I think it's as difficult in the US as it would be in Finland.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It's a different solution there. So there you go.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, that was really different. Also, like you said, like, I think they get a bad rap sometimes for being like super progressive or whatever word you want to use. Right. I learned that, and I think this was really shaping my faith journey as well. Like, I learned a freer expansion of orthodoxy, if I can say it like that. Like, I don't know, I feel like we emphasize so many things here that then take away from actually just trying to live the faith more fully. And so not having such intensity around certain things, like especially social issues, like I had a much more pastoral response, because in their culture and society, a lot of things, one, are just like something that's personal is personal and it's individual and it's not like broadcasted to the world. So I think it's just different culturally, but that part, and then just like understanding a lot about pastoral response and being like willing to meet the people where they're at, and just trying to like provide a beautiful witness of the faith. And also like a way of physically doing that we experience is like there were so many processions all the time, especially in the capital. So I remember like my first couple weeks there, I was invited to the Swedish speaking community, had a procession around the city of Helsinki. We went around with like the crosses, like the censer, the priests were like fully enrobed, whatever. We went through like the metro, came up on the metro, like went all the way to the what's the word, like the port, with icons and like we would stop at certain places and like learn from other faith communities. We stopped at the mosque, we stopped at the Tatar Muslim like cemetery, learned their history. We stopped at the synagogue, and like then in other places where the Christian churches, we would say a prayer all together. So it was just like this integration into the society as well, without losing like the orthodoxy, if that makes sense. So highly recommend people check it out. Yeah.
Oh, that's really neat. Yeah, it would be neat to spend a couple of years in that and to see how it kind of reshapes. Is there anything coming home that, well, I mean, I guess just sort of in general, you want to bring that attitude, but is there anything coming home that you saw that you were just like, okay, now this is going to drive me crazy because they do it better in Finland?
No, I don't think so. I think it just, like you said in the beginning, like this plurality of the diversity of the Orthodox practice and like appreciating certain things. And I will say, like, I did miss understanding the liturgy. Like I studied Finnish intensely for a year, but it was not at the level where I can fully understand. So I appreciate being able to understand. So I feel, I guess, more I can understand better people's experiences of going somewhere and not understanding the liturgy.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because on the one hand, it's the same liturgy, and it's okay not to understand it because it's the liturgy, and the Eucharist is the Eucharist, and you stand there and pray, and when they're doing the great entrance or whatever, you can figure it out. But on the other hand, there is a real beauty to understanding the liturgy and to hearing those words and letting them just kind of sink into your heart because you know what they mean.
Like you said, there's both, because you could still be distracted with either. So I think it's a good one.
And sometimes they're not paying attention no matter what language they're speaking. So there's that. They could have been speaking Finnish and we wouldn't have known it. But
exactly.
Oh, wow.
I would say, like, to answer your question, maybe something that came to mind, and it has to do with my current work. So I'll just quickly share about that too, because I know we're running up on the hour.
No,
but
please do. Hear it.
Yeah, I think like seeing that you can have kind of like one church and still kind of cater to immigrant needs of language in the church, and figuring out what that looks like. So kind of this more unity was really formative and inspiring, because I had not experienced it like that. And also just like good relationships with other interfaith communities, which obviously we do that here in the US too. But I would say like that was a really helpful perspective for my current work at the Assembly of Bishops, which is the Inter-Parish Associations, because as you kind of said in the beginning, Orthodoxy here in the US is a little bit different because of our migrant kind of immigrant histories and jurisdictions, etc. And so kind of the current project or ministry that I'm working or serving with is like trying to break down jurisdictional barriers across different parishes in a local context and really encourage parishes to do more together, to collaborate, and also build relationships together, and really focusing one on like ministry together. So of course, obviously worshiping together and building opportunities for that, but then thinking about one, getting to know each other, and through that then saying, is there a need or a shared need that we can work on together? So for example, shared catechism, which they do in some areas around the country where priests rotate, like the catechumens, and they go through the same curriculum, or having a shared youth program. So like being able to understand ourselves better as Orthodox Christians and supporting one another, while obviously still having your unique parishes, but like doing this work and witnessing more fully. And then again, then together in this kind of association of parishes, then thinking about what does it mean to witness to our neighbors outside of our church walls as a kind of united Orthodox presence and being a bit more relevant in our communities. So I think that experience in Finland has really shaped my understanding of what that could possibly look like. Again, different context and whatever, but it's a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Oh, that's neat. I really love the idea of rotating the catechumens between different priests and parishes, right? Because you do, I mean, Orthodoxy kind of has a different flavor. When you're coming in and you don't know, like, what is Orthodox, you kind of associate that priest's personality with Orthodoxy. And then eventually you know more priests and you're like, oh, okay, actually, this is the thing that they all have in common is the Orthodox part, and the rest of it's their personality or whatever. So how nice to get that right from the beginning and to be able to go around and have things phrased in different ways. And I love that. This is how lovely.
Yeah.
How neat for you to be able to have all of these learning experiences and get all of these new ideas from Finland, and then to come home and find this job as if God had just lined it all up for you so that you would learn everything in exactly the order you needed to learn it. You know, he's good that way. Thank God.
Yep, definitely agree. 100%.
So where are you located now? Where are you living now?
In New Jersey.
Yeah. Are you back home or are you just in New Jersey?
I'm back home. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. How's it moving back into home after being so far away from home?
Yeah, it's good. I also think, like I said, there's a lot of reverse cultural shock. And like you said, you change a lot as a person through whatever experiences. So it's a lot of like, what's the word? I don't want to say sifting, but yeah, sifting through like, okay, who am I now in this context that was familiar before? And yeah, so it's good. A lot of learning and transitioning.
That's amazing. Yeah, sifting is a good word for it, really, because, and I felt like converting was like that, actually, sort of sifting through, like, okay, if I'm Orthodox, can I be this? Can I be that? But it's like that. It's like this new person of me, that is this new version of me coming in. What do I keep? What do I lose? What combines? That's neat. That's very neat.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so you'll keep in touch and let me know what you continue to be doing over time.
Yes, of course. So glad to catch up. It was super fun to do it here. And I really appreciate it.
It was so good to catch up with you. It is good to see your face again. And I'm so glad that you're doing so well. So thank you for coming on the program, Spyridoula.
Thank you. Thank God. Yeah. And excited to hear all the stories of the people that are next. So thank you.
Who knows?
Yeah.
What could happen next week. And thank you to our audience for joining us tonight. And come back next week and we'll see what happens. You never know. No idea.